Today, we're talking about the tiny paws that make a giant impact at work, how celebrating our pets could boost connection, empathy, and even performance. And we are joined by one of the leading voices on pet inclusive workplaces. Welcome to the podcast show, Dear Human Resources. I'm Marie-Lynn Germain, your host, researcher, author, and curious explorer of the people's practices and what make work actually work. So our topic today is the importance of celebrating our pets in the workplace. From Slack channels full of puppy pics to thoughtful pet bereavement policies, organizations are really recognizing what many of us already know. Pets are family, and honoring that truth can really transform culture. So our guest today is Erika Sinner. She's the founder and CEO of Directorie, a $15 million healthcare commercialization company, and a two-time incorporated 5,000 honoree. She also serves as the Chief Empathy Officer at the nonprofit TinySuperheroes, empowering critically ill children to discover their strength and voice. A passionate advocate for pet-inclusive workplaces and a leading voice on pet bereavement leave, Erika is the best-selling author of Pets Are Family. Wow, Erika, welcome.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
So let's start big. Many leaders want stronger connection and trust on their teams, but they often default to another meeting or to another tool. And we want to know, why do pets succeed where playbooks sometimes fail? So Erika, the topic of pets in the workplace is fairly new, isn't it?
Yes.
So how does recognizing and celebrating pets in the workplace can help humanize leaders and create genuine connection across teams?
You know, for me, when I started my company, I had a unique way of thinking about how I wanted my employees to feel. I wanted them to feel human, not just hired, and culture was very important to me. And so as I think about today's workforce and what today's family structure really looks like, 8 out of 10 American homes have a pet within their household. Many of them consider them part of their family. And so as employers, I think it's important for us to recognize the family structures that make up our workforce. And by having compassionate policies like pet bereavement, you're signaling to your employee that you really do care about them as a human being. They're not just a hired employee. And I think that's important. I think culture is really taking it back to the human, and recognizing things that happen outside of work will absolutely impact their work productivity at work.
So do you have any examples of pet moments diffusing, for example, tension or helping a new team gel?
Yeah, I mean, listen, they're so bonding, and it doesn't just have to be dogs. It can be cats, it can be birds, it can be turtles, right? These are companions to family units. They are with you through big milestones in your life. And they're such an icebreaker. I think at work, we do our Slack channels, we share photos of our animals, we'll be on Zoom calls and our dog will pop up. And it's just such a moment to have a human moment where we can laugh and we can play at work. And anytime that you can do that, when you can pause and be in the moment, or even have a memory making play at work, it signals to your employees that it's safe to be a human and to show up as yourself, which that creates safety, and that type of safety within your workforce creates innovation, which is what we all want within our workforce and our culture.
You're one of the leading voices around embracing pet bereavement leave. What inspired that advocacy, and how has it been received by leaders and employees?
Yeah, so, my husband and I chose not to have human kids. Our dogs are our children. And it's always been that way. And I think when I started my company, I knew I was going to need this type of policy in place. A year and a half ago, we lost our son, Kingston, and it was really hard. And I realized I needed it. I took the leave. What I didn't realize was the shame that I would feel taking it, right? Am I showing up as a CEO? Sometimes it's met with like, it's just a dog. Can you get another? Which is what you would never say to someone if they'd lost even a great uncle in their family.
Wow.
And I think to answer the question around, why the advocacy is, I know for myself, I wouldn't have been okay without the time off. I know having my employees and my friend and family send flowers or send me a text to say, hey, I know this is a really hard time for you. I know I wouldn't have been okay. I can't imagine having to go on this journey alone. And so I wrote my book, Pets Are Family, and I felt a responsibility to advocate for others to have access to a policy like this.
Can you share some of the misconceptions that you encounter most?
Yeah, I think sometimes I launched my book through during an election year, and I think a lot of the messages I received back was, this generation doesn't want to work. Employees are taking off too much time. What if they start to abuse the policy? And my response to that is, the CDC reports that American companies, it cost us $200 billion every year in unmanaged grief. And it's not just your employee taking off work, but if you force them to come into work, the quality of their work, the impact of how they're feeling to the rest of the team, they might also just call out sick anyway. And so as an employer, you have a real opportunity to show up for your employees for something that doesn't happen too often, right? Like animals, this isn't an every year thing. And you're able to not only be there emotionally for them, there's an emotional benefit as an employer, but there's also that economic benefit of having a policy like this. So I think this misconception of, people don't want to work or they might abuse the policy, I think you would have that with any corporate policy. And it's really up to the management team on what does your culture look like? How are you meeting with your teams? What does the manager-employee relationship look like? But this type of policy really signals to your employees in black and white that you care about their full family structure.
Culture shifts are often measured in stories. So let's talk about pet bereavement and pet inclusive practices more broadly. They represent meaningful cultural change. What success stories can you share that illustrate business impact or well-being gains, if you will?
Yeah, I have heard stories from our own employees here at Directorie where they have said the scene on the job description that we honored pet bereavement leave was something that said to them, I want to go work for them. They clearly care about their employees to have a policy like that. You don't see that all of the time. But I would also say that to demonstrate really like the well-being of it, the US Surgeon General states that in today's world, today is a heavy world, that we have a loneliness epidemic, and that this loneliness is actually as bad for our health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Well, guess what helps loneliness? Animals, right? And so encouraging your employees, to say I'm a pet supportive employer or I'm a pet supportive workplace. I think a lot of people think, oh, let's bring your dog to work day. But it's so much beyond that. It's really, can you be there for them in the hard moments too, with their animal, and really supporting them having one, because it also helps on the loneliness side. It gets you out of bed, it gets your routines going, you're taking them out. And that all benefits us as employers as well.
Do you have any metrics, Erika, on retention, engagement, reduce absenteeism, and so on?
For retention, there's some studies that have come out of San Jose University that have said that companies who have pet bereavement leave show higher employee satisfaction and also the retention piece. And retention is important because this is such a big moment in your employee's life that should they quit the job, right? SHRM then reports it costs 3 to 4 times the salaried position you're trying to backfill. So again, you have a real opportunity to show up for your employees. But I would say the reduced absenteeism is when it is something, some people, when they have grief, they might say, I just want to come to work. This is actually what I need to do to process the grief. So this won't be for everyone. But for those employees who really need it, and some of the stories that I've heard, if they're going to call out anyway, could it be something where you've really shown up for them and the rest of the team understands what's going on? You're able to communicate it. And when they come back, everyone's not like, oh, were you on PTO? What did you do? And you have this awkward moment where it's like, no, actually my dog died and I'm broken.
I don't typically share personal information on podcast recordings, but I have 2 cats, 2 super senior cats. That's what they're called.
Yeah.
Clark is 20 years old.
Oh, wow.
And Margot is 16. And there's not a day I don't think about how it's going to affect me the day Clark passes. And just thinking about it breaks me. And so I can't imagine, which is exactly what you said, how it will impact me and my work.
And creating space for that. Our animals, It's some of the most important relationships we've ever had in our lives. And both Harvard and Stanford have published studies around the human and animal bond and on why does it hurt so much. And it's not like a relationship where it's conditional with any other human being. It is truly unconditional love. They become a part of your daily routines. They become a part of our identity. I call myself a dog mom. They shape our spending choices. Some of them even sleep in our beds. And, how do you get any more intimate than that?
And you think about the number of years. I mean, Clark is 20, right? 20 years
Yes.
old. Having a pet for 20 years old, it's like having a child.
Yes.
Um,
And what
yeah,
experiences have they been with you? What milestones have happened in your life that they were with you and they got you through?
exactly.
Really beautiful.
Erika, what did the rollout look like in organizations that did it well?
I think it's as simple as adding it to your policies that you already have. So if you're offering bereavement, it's including them as part of that in the language that's in there. I think that the other piece or the piece that might be a little harder, and I write about this in my book, I offer it as my resources in part 5, is what does it look like for managerial training so that when someone comes to them and says, hey, I am actually having to take this time off because I'm putting my dog to sleep tomorrow or something has happened. It's really just training the manager, and this doesn't have to be difficult. It can really be an all hands meeting or a leadership training meeting to say, here's a policy update that we've made, and when an employee comes to you, here's how we handle that. And there's never oh well, it's just a dog. Are you sure you can't be here tomorrow? It's having the grace and the understanding and the compassion that you would if they lost a human family member, and applying those same societal norms.
So, for leaders listening to our podcast today who are thinking, where do I start without breaking the budget or opening a policy can of worms, what advice would you give to leaders who want to normalize conversations around grief, compassion, and the role of pets play in employees' lives?
I'm so glad you have this question because that is usually where I see most start with, oh, this is going to break the budget, or I'm going to have to reopen. It's exactly how you said it. And I think the first step is reframing that to really know that $200 billion cost from the CDC, the impact to them coming to work if they're going to be grieving, and what does that mean for quality of work? What does that mean for the rest of the team? Or if they just call out in sick anyway, you're going to be dealing with these things anyway. So how wonderful is it for us to be talking about this now and to plan ahead, right? These aren't things like you just said. Your cat 20 years. Most animals live 8 to 15 years. So it's not happening all of the time, which is, it's not a health benefit. It's not a new insurance policy plan. It's truly thinking about how often does this really happen? And then from a policy standpoint, it's looking at what you already have. And if you don't have a policy for bereavement, in my book on part 5, I also have language you could use that we use in our organization around bereavement.
Would a pilot study make any sense in an organization, or like a pilot plan, or kind of testing it, or it really wouldn't really be effective?
Some companies have asked me that, and I think you can decide in the same way that some organizations say, here's our bereavement policy that is only for immediate family or only for immediate family and grandparents. I think you can pilot it in terms of saying, here's our pet bereavement policy that only applies to dogs and cats. Or right, like if you're not feeling comfortable with all pets, right? Maybe it's a bird, maybe it's a turtle, and they live a really long time too. You could pilot it with a smaller, dogs and cats parameter around it, but I wouldn't suggest piloting it for only a certain type of employee or managers. I would say if you're going to go in on pet bereavement, do it for your whole company and then just decide what are the parameters of the policy.
So how do you ensure inclusivity for the employees who don't have or don't want pets?
I think it's always a personal decision in the same way that companies have maternity, paternity leave. But for myself, it's like I didn't choose to have human kids, so those policies never applied to me. I think if they choose not to have pets, I think that that's okay too. Having a pet supportive workplace where you're sharing pictures of animals on Slack, or they're coming to your meetings, or you're honoring the love and the grief when they pass, I think only helps us come to work fully ourselves, it allows for us to be vulnerable with each other, which can like create other types of relationships with your employees that are meaningful and that have them more invested in their work. But pets aren't for everyone. It's a personal decision on when and how you want to expand your family. So for me, I just think there's an upside knowing 8 out of 10 American homes have pets on why we would want to do this. But of course, right, not all employees will want to have an animal.
Is there one myth about pet policies you wish, Erika, would disappear?
I would say, the myth that to be pet supportive, that it's like bring your dog to work day. I think there's so many ways to really support pet supportive workplaces, which could be pet bereavement, which could be pet insurance, which could be, for us, we also offer paternity leave. So when you welcome a new animal into your family, we give you a day off work to say, hey, we're so excited for you, but also to give you some time to readjust. So you can also have fun with it too. And it doesn't have to be hard. It really doesn't. Even talking about pet bereavement and thinking about how sad it is, I think people say, like, I don't know what to say to somebody who's lost an animal. And I would say it's just the same level of effort that you would do if they lost a human. Like, what are the societal norms around loss in humans and applying those to animals?
Tell us a little bit about your company.
So yeah, Directorie, we help small to mid-sized pharmaceutical companies bring their medications to market. Every year, 2,500 new drug applications go to the FDA. Only about 10 to 25 of them are actually approved. And so for all those other companies who didn't get approved, the company goes into cash preservation mode. Either they need more data, or they have received a complete response letter, or they need to just spend more time on the actual data that they've submitted or clarify. And so what we do is we help them get through that time period. And the reason it's successful is because it's really hard for them to have access to top talent, right? It's hard to get someone at Pfizer or Merck to leave their big pharma job, come work for the smaller company. And then what happens if you don't get approved, right? Like they're still they need to pay their bills, they need to have a salary, they need to have a job. And so that's what we do. We help these smaller companies make sure that they have access to top talent.
That's funny. Quite different from pet policy, huh?
Yeah. Yes. But this is where I felt such a responsibility and a pull to want to talk about this, because I'm a real CEO with a real organization who we are on the Inc. 5000 list twice. I mean, that is triple digit growth 2 years in a row. And it's the last 6 years running is how that list works. And so I really believe that I've proven you can demand excellence, accountability, and have a high performing team and still really care about them as human beings. And one of those ways could be through a compassionate policy like pet bereavement.
Yeah, I mean, celebrating pets can really humanize leadership, strengthen connection, provide a compassionate framework for real life at work, especially through thoughtful policies like pet bereavement leave, as you explained. So I guess people can start small, be consistent, and remember that empathy scales through habits. And so, Erika, thank you very much for your insights and for leading this conversation.
Thank you for having this conversation, for dedicating an episode to it. It has been such an honor to be here.
So if you guys enjoyed this episode, share it with a colleague who loves their furry coworker. And I'm Dr. Marilyn Germain. Thanks for listening, and give your pet an extra treat from us.
Support for this show comes from Western Carolina University, a campus of the University of North Carolina system, with the technical assistance of Kelly Minnis.